Hi. You suntan, don't you?
Yeah,
That's good.
been out in the sun a lot.
That's
this
good.
weekend.
All right. We should be live and ready to go, Lisa.
All righty, let's, the echo's weird in this room. It's been 3 years, pandemic. Let's get the Joint Animal Service Commission meeting for July 8th started. I'm calling the meeting to order. And I would like to start with introductions. Hopefully if we spend a little time on this, we'll get 2 more of our JASCOM commission members to join us. I'm Lisa Parsley. I'm the chair from City of Olympia. I'm gonna move to my right.
Victoria Smith, veterinarian.
Malcolm Miller, City of Lacey, Deputy Mayor.
Joe McGuckin, Feline Friends.
Sarah Hawk, Executive Director for Animal Services.
Shannon Kelly Fong, Assistant City Manager for the City of Lacey.
Do we have anyone joining us yet?
No, but Emily said she just pulled up into the parking lot.
Oh, good. Assistant City Manager, should we wait on approval of the amended agenda or can we do it because it's not fiscally related with the current members?
Yes, you can approve it. You do have a quorum since it's not budget related.
Okay. I'm seeking a motion to approve the amended agenda that adds item 5A, which is a space needs assessment update.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, okay. And just for those who don't remember, which is always me, because this is kind of a cool way to do your consent agenda item. This improved not only the approval of the agenda, but May 13's 2024 meeting minutes and our May shelter statistics. Do we have any public comment?
Not at this time.
Okay. Keep looking over. We're gonna move right on to the business items with 5A and a space needs assessment.
All right. Some of this will be a refresher, but since we have not met since May, I will go through quickly some of the parts that should seem familiar as we move along in our update. So currently, just to give JASCOM an idea of where we are with the space needs assessment timeline, is we're where the star is. We're just finishing up task 2 and we're going to be getting ready to start in task 3 of the timeline. So some of the tasks that have been completed are, first was data gathering. So, and that we analyzed data to understand the existing needs, including floor and site plans of the current building and site, information on some potential sites within identified by the city. They also, Animal Arts looked at the last 5 years of data intake when it comes to animals and adoptions and our housing and how many animals we have in the system at any given time. As well as they looked at our strategic planning documents, all of that, some ideas of what we were looking at for a programmatic, and any applicable regulations that would limit our abilities to do operations. They also held a workshop for staff and volunteers to get an idea. They took a tour of the existing site, ran workshops for 2 days with different staff members and volunteer groups, asking what our needs and wish list wants would be for a shelter. And then also there was a discussion portion with City of Lacey staff and some leadership, including Assistant City Manager, to talk about what leadership's ideas were that were priorities for the new building. So with that, Animal Arts was able to prioritize a list of space requirements for review and finalization, including coming up with adjacencies. Adjacencies meaning like where are the dog and cat areas, other animal staffing, public spaces, veterinary areas, and how the flow would look overall with the shelter. And if you guys remember too, what we talked about last time was that there was the existing site analysis. And so there were many disadvantages to continuing to consider building on the current site of Joint Animal Services. Safety was a big one, but there's also limited room for development. There is a big wetland buffer zone. Portion of it is a flood zone. Public transit is difficult to access, as well as, you know, some of the advantages are we are currently zoned for it. People know where we are, and the utilities are available. But also some of the existing constraints become the wetland and flood zones really prohibit a good portion of the 5 acres is really only 2.5 acres that can be developed. We're already sitting on that 2.5. And we would still need to stay in operation while they were developing and constructing the new facility around us. There's also a lot of issues with the design and adjacencies as they were, making it very limited for fire access if there was emergencies. And the adjacencies were very inefficient and would create a lot of operational barriers and constraints if we were to build it on the current property. So what we had come to at the last meeting was it was recommended that redeveloping the current site is probably not optimal for the new shelter. And so what we're currently looking at, so next steps are going to be for our concept plans in task 3. So our current contract includes up to 3 concept plans, with 1 being a concept plan of the existing site, and 2 being alternate sites to look at. What we are looking at right now, if we are choosing not to move forward with the current site as one of those options, what we would like to recommend is that we move forward with only doing 1 concept plan for a particular alternate site currently, so that we can have a better understanding of what costs are going to look like. Because we can't move forward without at least picking a concept, so that when we start talking about costs and we start talking about funding, we have more concrete numbers to really have a better understanding in this discussion when we're talking about funding. So that would be our recommendation, would be to hold on to 2 of the concepts for a later use in case for whatever reason and the current alternate site that we're possibly looking at does not work. We still have 2 concepts that we can work with at a later date, but at least using 1 of those now, we will get a better understanding of what those costs are, so we can begin having those discussions. So we have been looking at potential alternative sites, and we have come up with a potential one. It does meet a lot of requirements that we have been looking at, including that it's in the city of Lacey. There's access to the I-5. There's multiple parcels, so it's a combined parcel of 7.21 acres. There are utility connections. It is safe for staff and visitors. It's permitted for our use. There's minimal adjacencies to residential, so we won't be bothering any neighbors with our noise. And there's access to public transit. And so the other part of this is that 4.27 plus or minus of those acres are buildable. There is a chunk, once again, that is not buildable. But that's okay. Just because there can't be a building on it does not mean that the acreage isn't usable for our needs. There does not appear to be any wetlands on the site. However, we would have to move forward with a critical area study before we would know for sure. what those boundaries or if there's anything that we need to do. And the site, when we did have it appraised, currently appraises for $3.9 million. Just to give everybody an idea.
Not surprising.
Yeah.
Any existing structures?
No. And so the current phase, we would do one final concept with the idea of it possibly using that alternate site as our model for those cost configurations. And it'll include a cost model. It'll have concept drawings, but please note these are not going to be architectural drawings. That would be a next step after the conceptual plan is phased. These are to give us an idea of looks and a better idea of cost. To help us be able to communicate to the jurisdictions and to interested parties about what the idea of the shelter would look like in those general costs. So this is an example, just as an FYI, of one of the shelters that Animal Arts built. This is Orange County Animal Services, for example. And so next steps. Again, we're recommending that we move forward with the one concept plan today. And we do not do a concept plan for the existing site and save those two others in case we need to have different concept plans drawn up. And then we would begin to meet staff to staff with jurisdictions to discuss possible funding strategies for property acquisition and construction. Questions?
What's the current property appraised at?
So we don't have a official appraisal on our current property yet.
You know the assessed value?
It's a great question, Deputy Mayor. I don't, and we can certainly get that information and get it back to this group.
What's the address?
3120 Martin Way East.
And he'll be the one to get it for us. I know what
Like I
we're
said,
paying.
we can get that information. We'll send it out.
I know what we're paying for the one across the street, so I can give you kind of a guess. It was around 2 million for that properties. With wetlands.
Any other questions?
So what I got out of that was, one concept plan for this new mystery parcel.
Correct.
Is it possible to go into executive session with the Joint Animal Service Commission, because it's a property option, to be able to discuss actual location like we would with city council?
So we did bring our city attorney here too, just for, questions exactly like this. And so I'm going to invite Dave Schneider, if Dave, you don't mind hopping up here for a few minutes.
Because I know you can't talk about it unless it's exec session at
Well,
this moment.
And I think there's a difference though, and I know Dave will correct me if I'm wrong, between, property discussions of negotiations. And right now we're at it, we just identified a site that would fit our needs for continuing on in this process. And what's something that Sarah didn't mention, but that we have been looking for sites for the last few months with the help of Ashley and Animal Arts and the rest of our public works team. We did identify a couple of potential locations and went through kind of a brief vetting process with Animal Arts and really found out that some of the other sites that we saw weren't really going to fit the needs for this particular facility. We've also been reaching out to other jurisdictions and entities during this time as well to see if maybe there's some surplus property for us to consider and have conversations. And at this point in time, it doesn't look like that is a viable option moving forward. And so to go back to your original question, but to also give just a little bit more background on all the work that has gone on to get us here, where we've identified a potential site that we just want to take a look at doing our concept design for, right? This is really to be able to keep doing all of the work that's been building off of those adjacencies and see what could be on a site of this size, what that would look like within this type of zoning and with those potential, critical areas around if it would fit our needs moving forward. So
Yeah, well, to answer your question, my name is Shannon, indicated. I'm Dave Schneider, so I'm Lacey's city attorney. And Shannon asked me to stop by this evening just to answer any questions related to a potential property acquisition and perhaps maybe some of the steps that have been taken thus far and what future steps could be if the commission wanted to go forward with acquiring a property. Specifically with executive session, so that could be utilized when discussing an acquisition of real property, but only if disclosure of the conversation is going to have some sort of effect on the price. So generally speaking, when we're just talking about a piece of land and whether it be suitable or interest in it, would take place in open session. If offer made and there's counter offers and there was to be discussion about, whether to make another counter or kind of that sort of conversation could properly take place in executive session at some point down the road. But just real briefly, so Shannon and Sarah indicated to me, I know that this body previously authorized was aware of this parcel and authorized an appraisal to be performed, which is the first step that a jurisdiction is going to take when considering to acquire property. And so that appraisal's been performed. It came in at 3.9 million. That's total, as Sarah indicated, for all 4 parcels. And they did a sales comparison approach for it, which is pretty standard with land. You're looking at what other similarly situated parcels have sold for. They looked at 7 parcels in Thurston County. I think they were all in Thurston County. And they ranged from 14 up to $28 a square foot. This one came in at the appraisal was at 21 and change, $21 roughly per square foot. And so now armed with the appraisal, the entity here, JASCOM, would look at the appraisal and discuss and consider whether this is going to be useful. I mean, with the property, is that something that is a piece of land that is wanted? Is there an intent to acquire? And there's obviously a lot of work that needs to be done as far as funding and whatnot before those decisions can be made. If though, at some point, the decision is made that yes, we'd like to acquire this piece of property, then that's when a formal offer would be made. And that has to be made at what the entity considers to be just compensation, fair market value for the property. City of Lacey policies, and of course, I understand that this isn't City of Lacey body, but I mean, that's what I'm familiar with, would be, and I'm sure, I'd speak with, I have good relations with all the attorneys for all the jurisdictions represented here. And I'm pretty sure that most of the processes would be very similar throughout, the 4 entities. But an offer would be made for that fair market value for the just compensation. And then, of course, there's always going to be a counter offer and then discussion, negotiation, whatnot. There can be second appraisals done. There can be review appraisals done. For Lacey, if there's going to be ever an adjustment to the offered price, it's got to have a basis, a reason for that. And so at any rate, if the funding's there and the parcel is wanted, that proceed down that track. And then if there's a meeting of the minds as far as the value, then there's going to be a purchase and sale agreement that's going to be followed with a due diligence period where the suitability, there need to be environmental tests, whatnot, to make sure, you know what you're getting. That can all take some time. But I think, at this point, in the interlocal, I don't know how much Shannon or Sarah's discussed, the interlocal agreement, that created Joint Animal Services. But the funding and where that's going to come from, I think that's why Shannon and Sarah are recommending speaking with the other administrations from the other jurisdictions, is to kind of see what the appetite is and how that can work and whatnot. So
So I guess my question was finding out the identity of the property. And our council mentioned, it might be very different than yours if the city is beginning to look at a parcel. But we don't want to slip our hand to have the property price go up. We will go into executive session and say, this parcel is open, it fits what we want. Do you want us to proceed with an offer? And that's when we find out the actual identity of a property, if we're looking, say, for housing unit. At what point would the JASCOM find out the identity of this property? I don't want to push it in an open meeting, so I'm not actually asking for that now. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because that's gonna be a question the other jurisdictions are going to ask. Where is this? What is this property? Because it might shake loose a piece of property somewhere else that is cheaper and can be an exchange of land or, could be part of the assessment and part of the capital. That's where I'm going, I guess.
I mean, we can tell you that it's off Carpenter. By the Olympia property that you talked about. But that's,
Okay. I'm posing a question that probably can't be answered right now, but just letting you know, I think that will be an importance to the other jurisdictions.
I do think, just to make a point of distinction of kind of like talking about where you all are in the process. We're not quite there yet. We don't have a, funding mechanism. We really need to start those conversations now with our peer groups of understanding. Hey, at a minimum, if we're going to be looking for a property of this size, whether it's this potential site or a future potential site, we now know that we're probably looking somewhere in this ballpark range. And if we're moving beyond our existing site.
So you're saying this is an example site?
Right, this is right now, we're starting this off as a concept, right? And that's what Sarah was, talking
I get
about
what
here
you're
of.
doing. It's not an actual piece that you want to put in money, but it serves as a potential example
Well,
for your concept.
And I think it's to move us to continue us in the process where we're at with Animal Arts in the contract. And that's not to say that this isn't a site of potential interest, right? But we need to continue to move forward with our contract so we get a concept plan. And that will help better inform this body as well as the bodies of the other jurisdictions as far as costs. I think right now we already feel a little bit more informed about what potential costs for land are going to be moving outside of our current and existing site. And so that can help start those conversations. But I think we won't know the full impact until we go through the concept of what we're going to need to have for funding for this facility. And then what might be vehicles and avenues to fund this collectively and what that could look like. And so we really need this as a starting block for those conversations. So we can keep the process moving. And we really hope Sarah and I moving forward, working with other staff members across the jurisdictions to start putting on some additional resources into thinking about what future funding could look like.
Okay, that's good.
The capital facilities
you.
plan
Good explanation.
that we went through with the city gave us that huge ballpark, right? It was between 20 million and 30 million. That's a huge ballpark when they're estimating like the size of potential facility, right? And so if we move forward with this concept plan and the idea of where the location could possibly be, so we at least have a starting point, then we can actually drill down some of those numbers more finite. And I think it would make conversations with the jurisdictions easier, right? Like it's easier to say that it's 21.5 rather than saying, well, it's between 20 and 30. 10 million is a huge difference when you're talking about it being funded, right? And so this would really help us identify like what we're really looking at and give us an idea of, square footage, size, programming that could happen out of it and what those, estimated costs could be.
This is a really good explanation. And then my last question is, if the concept for this that would potentially meet this property, would the alternatives be something, if we find a different property, that would allow if the property shape is different, it's long and narrow as opposed to square or round, right? Is that
Yes.
what you're hoping to use the alternatives for, is in case another piece of property pops up?
Correct.
I will tell you, the sooner the better to get to Olympia because we are going through a process because of a budget crisis that is a listening session that may very well end up in a levy in 2025. If we are going to change the budget of the city of Olympia for the next 5 to 10 years, we need to do it now. Because if we're gonna go for a levy, we need to know this is in the horizon for our bills. Does that make sense? Whether it's debt service, our portion of the debt service or bond.
Absolutely.
So the sooner the better is what I would recommend. Because that is going on right now as we speak and through the fall. Because in 2025, it may be, oh crap, how are we gonna fit that into it, you know? Does that make sense?
Does, yep, absolutely. And that's where, Sarah's recommendation was we really start meeting and having these discussions at the staff level to kind of understand. So there would be some pathways moving forward.
If maybe if possible, Olympia first, just because I'm chair of finance and I know what's happening right now in that process is very deep underway.
Do we have any examples of joint funded projects outside of utilities, and transportation that we could all look to?
Yeah, there's a couple of projects in the region that we're certainly, taking a look at, and I'll use the example of SCORE, which is a facility up in King County. It's a regional jail facility that was financed between multiple jurisdictions. And so that is, one method that we could take a look at and learn a little bit more about how they finance that. They did that through what's called a public development authority. And so there are tools out there to consider. There's also a lot of facilities for 911 communications that are done between joint jurisdictions. And so those are also models that we could explore and learn a little bit more about. Dave mentioned the ILA. The ILA was updated a few years ago and it actually removed the language that really talked about how we financed the previous building. And so we can certainly take a revisit and look at how that was done back in the early 2000s.
That'd be good. And wasn't RAC and the Children's Museum through one of those special districts?
Yeah, public facility district. So different type of district.
Yeah, but it's, same kind of concept though, different name.
Well, I think the financial model looks a little bit different. One may be a taxing district where the other one might not have a taxing thing necessarily.
Not that I want taxes, but I would love to see all of the potential.
And I think, this helps us inform those conversations too, when we're going in and we're saying, hey, we are looking at all these different models. And we also know, like Sarah mentioned, that the cost for this project is likely around X rather than this larger balloon.
And then, obviously, you've been by the way, I saw your numbers on, donations, fabulous, you're rocking it. Looking at deep dive into grants, even potential commerce and everything else.
Yes, the grants or like private foundations will only, in comparison to the whole, it's only going to be a small portion of that. And not to interrupt or change the subject, but actually, Ashley does actually have the assessed value to answer.
It's 2.6?
2.589.
I knew you could get
Is there any
that.
debt on it? Is there any debt on it?
No,
Or anything else you'd like to know?
I knew he'd come up with it. It's what he does for a day job.
Yeah.
Okay, this is good. I monopolized that. Sorry, is there anybody else questions on this?
Oh,
go ahead.
No, I just wanted to make sure no spotted owls or pocket gophers on the land.
that would be part of the critical area study that we do.
It is within the Woodland Creek area, so we gave that as part of the study.
Well, most of my questions were asked. I appreciate your questions, Lisa. And we're not looking at any sort of levy, so it's not as imminent to have conversations with the county, but I think it's a good next step to have those staff conversations to start analyzing the funding piece, because that was the main question I was coming with today. But that was already discussed, and I think that's a really good next step. So I'm looking forward to being part of those conversations or hearing how they go through staff. So I think we're on the right track.
We're not close enough yet, but I'll definitely discuss this a little deeper with the city manager. Potentially finance.
I love that you're on the JASCOM. It's a good thing.
Thank you.
It's a good thing for us right now, so that's gonna be to our advantage. Joe, do you have any questions? One last one, I can't help myself. On the concepts, how much space are we gonna be devoting to hospital and veterinary care?
They don't have square footage hammered out yet, just adjacencies.
Percentage wise? Nothing?
I couldn't even tell you, they literally gave me color blocks.
Okay.
So, like, I cannot tell you what that looks like. It's literally just the concept is literally within adjacencies, so it's literally just color blocks kind of delineating things, and we have no square footage, no percentage. It's just making sure that the flow itself within the building works. That's where we're at. So it's making sure that like cats aren't next to dogs and that cats are next to the veterinary clinic, so they have the least amount of movement. That
It's good.
you know, so that's where we're at as far as adjacencies, and they haven't done the conceptual portions of that yet.
Massing is the next step.
Okay, the adjacent question to that is, the reason I'm asking that is I foresee a future where we will need to expand veterinary care in this kind of service. How about build out expectations off any concepts? Like, oh, you could build off this side of the building or this side, or, where's the best add-on portion of your concepts?
Ashley, do you have any?
And Ashley, why don't you join us over here
Yeah,
at the
please.
table and introduce yourself, please?
Yeah. Sorry, Ashley, I'm really.
I'm Ashley Smith. We haven't met, design and construction manager for Lacey. Yeah, as Sarah mentioned, we just completed the very first steps of the space needs analysis, which is just adjacencies and kind of staffing counts and projections for the next 20+ years. The next step will be massing, which is, as you mentioned, how much square footage is assigned to each function in the operations. And then we can associate costs for that size facility. So you can certainly consider any kind of expansion plan that meets the needs of the agency as part of that. We've kind of played around with the idea with the consultants already with potential changes in the arrangements between jurisdictions in the future and how that would look. But without a site selected and a massed concept, it's really just an imaginary building at this point. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah, Lego. Okay.
Can the vets have an imaginary window?
I agree with that. Having worked in a place that has no window all day.
Natural light is definitely a priority.
In the last briefing we had about the analysis, was there a square footage estimate of space needs? I feel like I recall that being part of it.
There was
Okay, perfect.
25.
Yep.
Thank you.
And our current is like
8.
Yeah, that's how.
I think, importantly, like Ashley mentioned, we're not planning this facility though for just today. We're also planning it for the future. So, you're already thinking about, expanding, but we're hoping that, we'll have a building that will meet our needs for the foreseeable future.
And part of that was also programmatic. That was part of the workshops that we talked about, was envisioning what programs and services we would be rendering to the public, not just today and not just 10 years from now, but 20 years from now.
I'm cynical because I built 2 hospitals and I thought they were adequate. And by the time we moved in, we already needed room. So forgive my questions.
So, Chair, when Olympia built Unity Commons, they basically had like, what was it? They leveraged $1 million to produce the 20?
It was about 2.3 million that we put in from our home fund. And then we leveraged some capital funds out of the state. And then we leveraged private through Lehigh investors. And then there was a grant, I believe. And then, but Beth Dolio got a lot out of the capital. They got it all.
And then you guys were able to do it again
Mhm,
just recently.
mhm. And we're hoping to do it again on Franz Anderson. So that would be something to put in your memory for the future. Is Regional Housing Council maybe a good candidate to buy that property instead of an individual jurisdiction trying to purchase it for housing, but Regional Housing Council has access to commercial or commerce grants and other federal grants that we'll be looking for property to build housing on. So just keep that in mind as a revenue stream for this project. And that's sitting right near Unity Commons and some other property that Olympia is actually purchasing, so for the same thing. But that's, you're looking at those and how they funded them.
Yeah. Yeah, just kind of thinking, how can we?
You know. Cause I know Tumwater is in the same straits Olympia is with the budget. So,
And I think, Chair and Deputy Mayor, to that point, we are going to explore a lot of opportunities for, financing and funds here moving forward. So we'll be taking a look at, state and federal grant opportunities as well.
yeah. Yeah, okay, that was a really good conversation. Hopefully, thank you for the work you guys are doing. Really, it's amazing. From when I got on JASCOM to this moment, amazing. You guys have rocked it.
How long have you been on JASCOM now?
2018, before you were here. So where we are now and where we started is we're becoming what we always hoped to become. So I'm very proud of the work.
So Chair, if I could just before we move on to the next item, I know one of the things we just wanted to get some clarity on the direction was with the 3 concept plans. And so just want to
What does everybody think?
confirmation of just doing the one on the alternative site and holding off on the other 2 for now.
Thumbs up, everybody, if you agree or
I
no?
want to be clear on something before we move forward. So if this concept comes together and this concept is fit for this parcel, but from what we're saying here, that could be definitely transferable to another parcel, but we would have some hard costs established.
Correct. There'd be minor adjustments with any other site that we would move to, but it would give us a rough order of magnitude for bringing in servicing utilities and that size facility.
Okay, so then concepts 2 and 3 would just be slight adjustments
Correct.
and we would have like kind of our base number.
Correct.
And in the concepts is our architectural costs and everything else, estimates.
Soft costs would be included in that. I think to Shannon's question too, we're asking to move forward with the understanding that we don't have ownership on this property yet, obviously. So there's some effort to move forward with a minimal amount of risk, but
So if I remember last time we made an adjustment, budgetary adjustment of, it was 30?
It was, and it was to include so we could do an assessment, so we could have a better understanding of what a potential property that meets all of our specifications, what it would appraise for, so we had a better idea. And so that was part of it. It was also adjustments made to accommodate for some changes with Public Works time with one of the managers on the projects to accommodate for some of that too, I believe.
So it included funding for Public Works to continue with the process for the appraisal and then also for critical area studies.
Okay, so will another adjustment need to be made for this conceptual?
Yeah, this is part of the remainder of the contract.
Good question. Thank you for that interruption. Back to the thumbs up about the idea about, does that give you direction?
yes, thank you.
Okay,
I have
excellent.
one more question. I still give a thumbs up regardless of the answer, but do we know like an estimated value of the current property in terms of like how much we think we could get with the sale of that property?
We have an assessed value, but that doesn't give you a sales price or retail value. It's 2.6.
Okay, thank you.
And does that include the building? Because the building is,
Land and improvements. Then that's just county's information. That's,
But along that same line of thinking, the property that we were looking at, the appraised value was roughly half of what the assessed value was roughly half of what the appraised value, market value came in at, so. It's a wide spectrum there.
we could, assessed value doesn't really get you that far. Just-
Yeah.
And keep in mind, in most cases, the current site would probably not be bought for the building itself.
Right.
So
Yeah.
we know how we.
Just, you
Yeah, no, I
know.
figured as much, but it's good to know, just to have a rough idea, so.
You don't wanna keep it?
I don't know that anyone wants to keep
Ron's
it. So I think they would have to take in potential costs of what it would take to remove that building from the
We
property.
could offer it to the fire department for a training of a burning building, which might actually give us a little bit of money. They burn buildings down for you.
I like the creative thinking. Certainly we'll continue to look
You know,
into the future.
In our case, I don't know if that's why, since we're neighbors to a propane storage
That's
facility.
true.
You know.
Boy, we might pop a few of those. That's, yeah.
So the land alone is 1.3 assessed.
Okay. Thank you.
Good question. Any more? I don't want to move on. Thank you. Do you have enough information to move forward?
We do. Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Ashley and Dave.
And thank you for answering my question. Okay, that was really good. Director's report. I mean it. I'm so excited to see where we're going. It's a good job, you guys.
I'm not really, hold on.
Shannon's our resident expert.
I mean, it was. Did I break it? Oh, boy.
So you want to close out of some of the top points and see if that works? Oh,
You broke it. You broke Zoom. Wow, that's impressive.
this one is a new one for me, Sarah. I don't think I've seen this one.
No help anywhere here. Lisa's at the blue screen at desk.
Thanks, Lisa.
Oh, here we go.
Oh, okay, yay. Fantastic.
Would you too?
Oh. Sorry, all right. So continuing on with the director's report. Last meeting, Deputy Mayor Miller asked how much donations we had brought in this year so far. The answer to that currently year to date, when I pulled these numbers last week, was we have brought in a little over 93,000 for this year. But also wanted to bring up and show since 2019, the amount of private donations that has been brought in to JASCOM, with the caveat, I just want everybody, last year was a stellar year. There is an asterisk by it, just so to remind everybody that that was due to a large bequest. And so we don't expect to see big jumps like that year over year. But it's still, even without the bequest, we still had a very good year in 2023. And so there's been a total of $1.3 million that has been brought in my tenature here at Joint Animal Services. And I know I sent you guys an email, but I still would like to celebrate that we completed, now it'll be over 1,000 spay neuter surgeries. So we're very excited. We were so close to being a year on the date, but we were a week after when we completed our 1,000th surgery with Dr. Swearingen. To continue on with the training updates, so our two new FSOs that started earlier this year, they have been completed all their training and been released to run solo. So we have 5 full-time field service officers as well as a supervisor that are running calls in the county 7 days a week and responding after hours emergency 24/7. So Nichelle and Ashlyn pictured here, who are our two new field service officers, also went through a 3-day animal fighting training class recently that covered not just federal, but state, as well as how to perform an investigation, things to look for, and how to treat animals as evidence. Also, Sierra, Kate, and Katie went to, they completed their first module for Code 3. Code 3 is a national certification. There's 3 different modules, Module A, B, and C, that covers different parts of animal cruelty and investigation. And so you can see in the list here, there's lots of different things that are covered in the initial module. And as they move forward, it dives deeper and deeper into animal and cruelty and investigations, with this being the overarching intro into it. So it does cover a lot of ordinances, policies, ethics, you name it. So it's just another example of the continued training that we do for our entire staff and our field staff. And speaking of, our entire staff is actually going to go through a mandatory training with our field supervisor, Sierra. She's going to walk through step by step, so every staff member, from their point of view, from start to the phone call to care of the animals, knows and expects how to handle a cruelty investigation, the types of questions to ask, care, intake. And so everybody's on the same page when we do have to go out on a call. And then our lovely Dr. Smith is going to be training the field team in forensic veterinary examinations and other forensic medicine. And so the team's looking forward to that. Thank you, Vicki, we appreciate it. So you guys also would have received an email about us being at capacity and waiving fees over the weekend, 2 weekends ago at this point. Summer is our busiest time. We hit capacity on a regular basis. And being that we're a municipality, one of the issues that we consistently run across is it's not written into our municipal code that we can waive fees when it's a betterment of the animals, people, and staff. And so in order to alleviate and be able for us to waive those fees, we got a generous donation from a member of our community for $2,000 to help waive fees when needed. And then Best Friends gave us an emergency summer grant so that we can waive any types of fees if necessary to help us continue with our capacity. So they gave us both donations gave us the flexibility that it's not, we have to do it for this period of time or these certain animals. It's really about flexibility. So when we're at capacity for cats, we can waive or reduce fees for cats or kittens. And when we hit capacity for dogs, we could just waive it for that or decide that we're going to waive fees across the board depending on the situation. So this helps. It's really hard sometimes. We're not competing with other shelters, but it does make it hard when we do capacity pleas and are asking people to come and adopt. And then Tacoma, the Humane Society for Tacoma and Pierce County did the same announcement, but then they waived adoption fees. And so they literally did 297 adoptions when they waived their fees. And we didn't. So this now can help with those when we need it, which is really great.
Remind me, how much are the fees adoption again?
90 for a dog and 70 for a cat.
Very reasonable.
We do actually have some of the lowest adoption fees in Western Washington. Becca, our positive outcomes coordinator, and I will be at the Best Friends Conference this week. Becca is actually presenting a poster at the conference. So it's not a presentation, but it's a poster session where she will be presenting all the information and data that she presented to you guys earlier this year. With the data to basically, we're reinstating that allocating resources to positive outcomes works. And here's why. And this is the data that shows that allocating your resources to those positive outcomes, how that impacts the shelter. And so she has two opportunities where she will be speaking, presenting her poster at the conference to conference attendees about our positive outcomes. And again, thanks to Best Friends, they're actually gave both of us scholarships to attend, so. And events. So we've been really busy with going to different events across the area. The Yelm Dog Park opening, we went to an adoption event with Deschutes Animal Clinic at Yelm Farm and Pet. City of Tumwater Dog Days, City of Lacey Juneteenth celebration, and then upcoming we yearly participate in Pop Cars and Kids with the City of Lacey. We will be at the Thurston County Fair this year, the entire fair. And we will be doing kitten yoga with Lakewood Racquet Club. Our doggy yoga event was so popular that we have scheduled a kitten yoga event later this year. And we'll also be attending the Nisqually Health Fair. We do have some other tentative events that we are doing. I just haven't put them up yet because they are tentative and we haven't confirmed. And I have two happy tales for you guys today. First is Sasha, who was Christina Wagulera. She's the red husky. And so she's adapting really well. For some reason, they felt like they should rename her. I don't know why.
I don't.
I know.
But she's doing really well and gets along with her other husky friend and the kids. And she's just a joy to have in their home. And then we have Knox, who was originally Jar Jar Binks. And they again chose to rename, I'm not sure why. And they have, he was a little shy at first, but he's really getting along, super energetic, and they just love taking him out on hikes and wherever they go. So I thought we would get a twofer in since we didn't have June, so. And with that.
I always love that part. I need to, it's in your report. I need to get the names because my council loves that part. I'm not sure they listen to anything else. But it's there. All right, anything for the good of the order? Okay, hearing none, let's adjourn.